Do you think India has the capability of becoming the world leader in some of these technologies?
One of our companies, SpaceX, Skyroot, made a history of first private company of India launching rocket.
Every street, even if there are two streets a few hundred meters away, they can have very different temperatures.
Temperature tells you a very different story.
I mean, are there use cases in, say, better city planning, agriculture, infrastructure, water conservation?
Thermal data actually gives a drought information almost 15 days in advance.
Innovation is not just about having some advanced technology. It's about how do you use that technology to create impact in the real world.
We'll be able to complete our entire constellation, which will enable us to cover the entire globe.
Welcome to one more interesting conversation from my Positive Find series. In this series, I bring to you stories of people and ideas that are quietly finding solutions to many of our most important challenges. My guest today is Urmil Bakhai, one of the co-founders of SatLeo Labs, a company that uses satellites and thermal intelligence to map the surface temperature of the Earth with remarkable accuracy. Now, you may say, all this sounds very fascinating, but what does it have to do with my everyday life? What if I were to tell you that we are not very far away from the day when our maps would not just tell us how to get to a particular place, but will also tell us what is the coolest and the most comfortable route to take. And that's one of the many interesting possibilities that this technology can unlock. So let's talk about many of these interesting possibilities with Urmil. Welcome to my show.
Thank you.
And
Thanks for having me.
the pleasure. Your entire, what should I say, venture is so intriguing that I'd want to begin from the beginning, because in the normal course, we as lay people, when we think of satellites, we think of, satellites taking images of the Earth. But here, you're not talking about images, you're talking about capturing temperature. So tell us, how did this idea come to you? What is the problem you were trying to solve when you set up SatLeo?
Yeah. So as you rightly mentioned, most of the satellites are focused on capturing images, and we measure temperature, right?
Yes.
So and temperature tells you a very different story. A completely different invisible story, and that's where we differentiate ourselves as an Earth observation company, primarily into capturing thermal imaging, and that is essentially a temperature information for the globe. So we are three founders. One of them is an ex-ISRO scientist. His name is Dr. Narendra Ghosh. Another gentleman is Shravan Bhati. Uh, he's a geospatial expert, mainly into satellite imaging. We used to work for a company in agriculture, where through remote sensing, we used to track, identify crops, different type of crops, the yield of the crop, the acreage of the crop, the health of the crop, and so on and so forth, right? So that's called digital agriculture. So during that process, we found that the model is not, is achieving that kind of accuracy which we desired to, and and then we double clicked on that problem. We found that no, that is due to one data set which is not an accurate data set, which is temperature.
Uh-huh.
If you actually see, whatever temperature data we get, it's a single temperature which is an average temperature of the city or of a district or of a town, right? But that's not the story. No, the surface temperature of each and every object is different. And when you are giving farmer advisory to a level of a farm, no, that is a different a picture altogether, right? So that is where we understood that there is a gap. We then went to the drawing board. We thought, how do we capture temperature information in this kind of a degree, this kind of a high resolution? And we evaluated a lot of options. Can we have IoT devices? Can we fly drones? Can we fly aircrafts? And finally, none of that is as scalable as having our own satellites capturing this temperature information. And that's where we thought definitely it's worth getting into more and more R&D, and how can we solve that problem. So actually it all started with grounds up, rather than just having a satellite in place.
But you said that temperature gives a very different story. And as I've read, you were saying that every street, even if there are two streets a few hundred meters away, they can have very different temperatures. Now, tell us, why does that happen? How does that happen?
Yeah, so Chanda, just imagine two different location, right? One is having one area where you have a lot of trees. Another is a concrete parking lot, right? Now each and every surface and each and every material, for example concrete, it absorbs heat and radiates it in its own way. Whereas a green cover would absorb heat and would not radiate it first. So then you have cities where heat gets trapped within the kind of development we have around cities, right? So there are a lot of heat pockets which get generated. There are very dense areas. You have buildings just adjacent to each other, and you get heat. It's called urban heat island, heat waves. That is it refers to. Then you have lot of issues where people started using a lot of AC. For example, in any commercial building, you see the kind of air conditioning which is used, and that also radiates a lot of heat. So that is how each and every commercial, residential, open area, built up area, non built up area, green area has all different kind of temperature. Even when it comes to an agriculture land, depending on the soil moisture, there is a different temperature of that farmland. So it is very, very essential to measure it.
So, we'll talk about those. But first, let me ask you the use case that will interest most of us. Do you think we'll very soon get an app from you which will tell us, not just how to go from one place to the other, but which is the coolest street to take to get to that place?
Absolutely. That is the kind of ultimate objective, as SatLeo we want to get into, where, I mean, like, the analogy is very simple. When we started using Google Maps, we thought, is this really going to be helpful? Because we know where our, offices are, or we know where our residence is. Then why do we need to use the Google Map for that? But then came, the traffic data, right? So, just to monitor the traffic, the route, but you want to see the traffic data which is on your en route. Similarly, you would want to know whether as a maybe not sitting in air conditioning cars, it would not affect us that much. But imagine it for an elderly a person, or a bike cyclist, or people who are just taking a stroll, or a city which is having a Commonwealth game or an Olympic games to be held. For that, this kind of a route, this kind of a thermal route is definitely going to be much useful. And it'll just add on your traffic data. It is like, the app is already there.
Okay.
The
You call
mapping
it
is
some
already there.
thermal comfort or something, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's called a thermal comfort route. So depending on the kind of en route you will take, it'll just show a small deviation, saying that if you just walk, say, 100 meters more, this will be a much lower temperature than your normal route. So that's how it will differentiate with a map.
And of course, talking of other use cases, I believe that there have been instances where, because of the use of thermal data and the analysis of thermal data that you've generated, authorities have been able to prevent disasters rather than just responding to them. So, can you give us any such example and what happened there?
So, no, what we've done is, no, we did two pilot use cases in India. One is, no, at Tumkur Municipal Corporation. No, Tumkur is just near to Bangalore. What we did was, no, the authorities there wanted to map their, no, solid waste dump. No, what happens is any solid waste dump and landfill areas, emit lot of, hazardous, gases like methane and sulfur dioxide and so on and so forth. And they are so hazardous that it not only harms the residents who are nearby to a solid waste dump, but also no chances of those getting ignited and getting fire is also quite a possibility. So if you really want to actually track the kind of gases which a dump is emitting now, imagine a Tumkur is a very small town, but still has a 40-acre kind of a solid waste dump. Now, for you to identify a hotspot where exactly the treatment needs to be done, or where exactly the solid waste dump needs to get cleaned up, you need a identified area, and that is what thermal data does. So what we did was we flew drones, thermal drones around the solid waste dump. Through our satellite images, we mapped the entire city. Had their thermal profile, and there was a AQI kind of a meter which was displayed at the control center of the solid waste dump, which showed the percentage of methane it is emitting, and so on and so forth. So those kind of parameters were displayed, so that authorities can actually see where the levels are up, and they can actually try and mitigate those risks there.
So, in
Another
a way,
use
prevent
case.
a huge fire from taking place or something.
Absolutely, absolutely. And also, in if the gases are so hazardous that it starts affecting health of the citizens which are living nearby. Another use case was with Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation. This summer we identified hotspot areas across Ahmedabad,
Okay.
which are emitting the highest temperature. So we identified ward level temperature information and given it to the authorities. The health workers there acted upon the data, and saved lives of people dying from heat strokes. They what they did was they acted on that limited intelligence in terms of the interventions. They increased the water points there. They increased some shading there. They informed the nearby hospitals that this area is a heat prone zone, and chances of people getting affected by heat strokes are higher. So if you are able to concentrate on specific intelligence, that is much more useful, and you can actually save lives of people.
You spoke about prevention, but I'm sure there are use cases which can, go beyond all this and even make this world a better place. I mean, are there use cases in, say, better city planning, agriculture, infrastructure, water conservation? What are the other, areas where we can use this thermal intelligence?
Yeah, so no, apart from say when you spoke about urban cities for better planning, right? Where do we need to increase the green cover, right? So now every year, now authorities decide that my city needs to be cooler than before, right? How do you do that? You increase the green cover, you plant trees. But if you are given an information that this particular area, or maybe say out of some 35, 40 wards, if I am able this 3 4 no are the most hotspot hot prone areas, and if I increase green cover by say 10%, I'll be able to decrease by city temperature to at least 2 3 degrees centigrade. So that is kind of intervention you can have. Talking about agriculture, thermal data actually gives a drought information almost 15 days in advance than any naked eye or any other satellite data.
Oh.
gives, and that's how you're able to predict in case of a drought much in advance. You can actually do irrigation planning if you know the scientific way and know where to give water and where when to give water. So that is the entire water budgeting action. You can thermal data plays a very key important role there. Another use cases on the natural disaster part, you can actually predict forest fires,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? No, if you see forest fires, temperature is a direct deterrent for any forest fire. And the most prominent use case is defense.
Okay. Okay.
So, heat signatures of temperature, tells you what is invisible, right? So, for example, in any border areas, if there are some camouflage objects or any barrack which your adversary is planning to get, do, this data will actually tell you what are the activities underneath that barrack which are happening, through heat signatures. And even the recent war which happened between US and Iran, Iran shot a the most powerful aircraft from the US military, and it has been assumed that it was done through use of thermal signatures, because those aircraft, none of the radars were were capable enough to catch that aircraft, but Iran could just shot it just by using thermal signature. So, these are some of the very prominent and defense use cases. There are a lot of use cases which are little classified as well.
Is the
Defense.
breakthrough in technology you think that happened that enables you to do this? I know that you have in your team a lot of ex ISRO people as well, but can you, in very simple terms, tell us what is the technology or technological breakthrough behind this?
See, one of the most common technology breakthrough is miniaturization of everything, right? So you have, right from the chipsets, to everything, right? So, for example, if you look at, we have smaller and smaller, laptops and smaller chipsets and smaller things, right?
Hmm.
Similarly, same thing happened with space industry as well. You
Okay.
have smaller satellites now.
Hmm.
Earlier there were huge satellites which costed a fortune for you to launch it to the space. Now we have miniaturized satellites, a satellite in the size of a shoebox. Okay,
Oh,
and then you
okay.
have, yeah. So then you have miniaturized versions of sensors, which actually is are capable of imaging, from the space. That's how the overall, mass of and the weight of satellites are getting lower and lower. The launch cost is again coming down. Since the economies of scale right now, there are a lot of players wanting to launch their own satellites. A lot of, SpaceX, kind of, launching every now and every other day, right? So that's how the economies of scale have worked. The cost has come down, and that's where the innovation started happening around thermal imaging as well. So it is now more affordable, more sourceable, kind of. And then, it what happened was, for India, it actually started not, late as 2020, when government of India opened up space tech for private players.
Yeah.
They formed a body called InSpace. The whole objective of InSpace is just not to regulate the space industry, but also to promote the private companies and startups to get into the space. So that's where it all started, and more and more talent joined us, and here we are now. So it's more and more accessible now, I would
Hmm.
say.
Hmm. Hmm. But talking of technology, I mean, AI is impacting every field, every industry, every profession. So, in your field, in thermal intelligence and space technology, what role can AI play?
Yeah, so when you say thermal intelligence, so the answer lies in that word. See, a
Okay.
normal temperature information you have terabytes of data. Like no, when a satellite captures raw data, no, a layman or any individual or any organization, end user organization, will not be able to interpret this huge set of data. It is just a temperature data. But then what you make out of that data, the insights, the intelligence, is where the AI will play a major role. Through AI, it is now very easy to interpret those satellite images
Okay.
and make use of it. For example, as a forest department,
Mm.
I am concerned about where does the next forest fire might happen. I am not concerned about the temperature data or for that object, right? So a lot of insights out of the temperature data
Yeah.
is where. And not only from the data, our satellites will also will be equipped with an edge computing and with an AI chip, where only relevant data gets transmitted to the ground stations.
Okay.
Because if you just image and if you just transmit terabytes of data no without much output of it, no, it is a sheer waste of the bandwidth and the resources. So you only transmit which, so for example, only transmit the anomaly which you detect, right? So that's where the AI plays a very, very important role in the entire ecosystem.
And we spoke about thermal intelligence. We can talk about climate tech. We can talk about space technology since we are talking of satellites. But, how do you think India as a country is making progress here? And do you think India has the capability of becoming the world leader in some of these technologies?
Yeah, if you just recently saw, one of our company in space tech, Skyroot, first private company of India launching a rocket, right? So I think only after US and China, we are the third country who successfully, a private company who successfully launched the space vehicle. So if you really look at from the space tech, I'm sure from an overall AI part, India did miss the bus, where a lot of innovation has happened in the western part. Where US when China almost dominates the AI story, and India is still trying to cope up with wrapping around a lot of services around those innovations in AI. But if you really look at space technology, because of the ISRO heritage, India is having tremendous potential. Not only in making history, but also becoming number one in space tech in the entire ecosystem as such. When we say deep tech, it is not only large capital, but also the results are very, very far fetched, right? So that's where I think India is witnessing a change. The government recently announced a huge funding. It's called RDI funding, Research and Development Innovation Fund, where they are investing a lot in deep tech startup. They've already announced a few of their investments. So that would actually enable a lot of innovations, because India has got a talent. I know there is no dearth of talent as far as space technology, as far as manufacturing of these components and we have some excellent heritage of ISRO to help us out there. With this aided fund and kind of risk taking appetite, we are up there, and when you will see results very soon.
But in your journey, what do you think was one of the main challenges as you were building this SatLeo? Was it the technology? Was it the making people understand the technology, or was it funding, or was it finding talent? I mean, what was the biggest challenge you thought?
I think you name all of them. So and at each and every stage, any startup, actually, any deep tech or any startup does face all these challenges. So it all started with convincing people. At first instance, convincing us within, like somebody had an idea, and then we started deliberating it. We started reaching out to people, no, and then is the problem big enough, right? So that was one of the major question. And I remember when we started this, a lot of people, asked us questions. Are we really allowed to fly our own satellites? Are you guys, I mean, okay, daydreaming is okay, but are you guys sure? So those kind of, we started from there. After that, yes, convincing, VCs, especially as I told you, it's a deep tech. Whenever the question comes of, when we will actually start making revenues, when we will actually start making money, those kind of questions come in. It was really difficult, but I think, we had a belief that, we almost, did it for almost 1 year. So we knocked doors of, not less than 100 VCs, and after almost a year, we finally,
100 VCs you went through.
minimum. And after that, yes, talent is a challenge. But I think, we being fortunate, we are based out of Ahmedabad, and no, very it's very unusual where, people say that Ahmedabad, of all places, but Ahmedabad has got a good ISRO heritage. So we've got ISRO facility here. So you get lot of talent, from ISRO itself. People who've taken voluntary retirements, people who are already retired but still are, have tons of, knowledge, with them. Then on the facility front, we had InSpace, which is again arm of ISRO, which I talked to you. No, they have built a 1,000 crore facility in Ahmedabad. It as a testing facility for all startups to utilize it. Right, so all our satellites or our payloads are getting tested there,
Okay.
and all ISRO, people are managing that facility, and it is a regulator as a promoter of Indian space industry.
Oh.
So they've got thermovic chambers, and they've got clean rooms, and they've got vibration testing equipments, and you name it, and they've got very expensive softwares, design softwares, where a startup will not be able to afford it at the start. So if you are, and it is available to us at a fraction of cost, or maybe as a service model. So then that ecosystem is helping, and not only us. I think it is, and you just ask any space tech startup. No, this kind of facility is a boon for any of them.
Oh, interesting. And if you could tell us, where exactly are you in your journey as far as SatLeo is concerned? So, have you done only test cases? This is the first satellite that you're going to launch soon. Where are you in the journey?
Yeah, so first thing for us is to make our satellites ready, right? So we, our first payload, in record 6 months, we could design and build, indigenously here in Ahmedabad. And that payload is already integrated with its satellite bus, and it is a launch ready, satellite for us now. uh, and we've already booked the space for launch. Now we are going to launch it through SpaceX from US. And so that is scheduled in almost first week of October. So that is going to be our first satellite. So we call it as Tapas. So we're going to have series of Tapas. So Tapas 1 is getting launched this October. Tapas 2, again, little more high resolution payload is going to be launched somewhere next year, early next year, and then followed by our main mission, that is Pyro. Pyro is going to be launched sometime middle of next year. So that is where, the roadmap of our product, which we're going to send up in the space. From the use cases part, couple of use cases which I mentioned to you, they're all pilot use cases for us. And just to understand the customer journey, with the thermal data, just to educate the industry what thermal data can do. they are all done it with the available open source data sets which are there, because still till we don't have our proprietary data sets at this point of time. And so by 2029 we feel we'll be able to complete our entire constellation, which will enable us to cover the entire globe as far as the area of interest is concerned.
But tell me, if you fast forward and look at yourself 5 years from now, what would you think SatLeo would have achieved, or what problems would it have solved, or what impact would it have made?
Okay, so I think first, uh, SatLeo definitely would have own constellation of satellites. Where it would have at least 12 to 15 satellites up in the space,
Mm,
covering the entire globe, with thermal imaging,
mm,
and we would have a very high resolution and a very high frequency of data, thermal data. So we would capture any area twice a day. That is what our objective and our mission is. Uh, from the impact standpoint, uh, I think, as you said, we would definitely be having a thermal comfort route over a Google map, or no, the kind of temperature the data set. It should be available at the fraction of cost for any citizen, and for humanity as large. So, whether it is industries, whether it is citizens, whether it is farmers, or any forest fire authority, forest department authorities, the temperature data should be able to solve their day-to-day problems, which is right now unresolved. So
mm.
that is what SatLeo's objective and SatLeo mission down the line 5 years is what we envisage at this point of time.
No, fantastic. I'll wish you all the best in your journey. I mean, having done all this, what is it that gives you the greatest amount of satisfaction when you look back? I'm not just talking as an entrepreneur, but as an individual, as a person. How has this journey impacted you as a person?
I think no when authority, when the Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation tells us that we could save lives of people using their data,
Mm,
that is the kind of that kind of satisfaction level is something very, very different kind of impact we are able to create, and we are wanting to create for the citizens at large. Those kind of impact, when it results into success. I think that's the kind of satisfaction, that's the biggest satisfaction.
absolutely. I entirely agree with you. And before we end, I'll ask you some very uh, quick questions, some impromptu
Sure.
questions, and
Thank
you can just give short answers, whatever first comes to your mind on that. Hmm?
Sure, sure, sure.
So, one technology that will change the world in the next decade.
Absolutely, no AI. Again, no, I read somewhere that after AI, no innovation will stop existing. I mean, so that's an pinnacle of innovation. So more and more AI, and I think it is changing the world, but it is going to change much faster than what we are predicting. So that's what I feel.
One city that you would love to map thermally.
It's going to be my own home city, Ahmedabad. It's again a very hot city, so that's where we'll be able to make out of it.
Interesting. One climate myth people still believe.
I think one of the major climate myth is you see air temperatures, right? So we all measure air temperature, so that is called ambient temperature. But the surface temperature is gives you a different story, and it is very, very different. So for example, you had let's say 45-degree and air temperature, but the concrete road might have some different temperature altogether, and that's where things change in terms of behavior.
Hmm. One thing you've actually admired about ISRO.
Okay. So I think frugal innovation is what we all admire very much at ISRO. No, the kind of cost, no, saving way of innovation and frugal way of innovation, keeping fundamental things at fundamental level. No, that's what I think we all admire about ISRO.
Yeah, and in a way, that's true for many large successful organizations in India.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Very true.
One habit that you think makes you a better entrepreneur.
Okay. I think connecting with people. So when I say connecting with people, I mean listening. So when you listen to people, whether they are customers or whether they are own employees, that is what I feel that's a trait every entrepreneur, every business person should have.
Ooh. One book that influenced your thinking.
Okay. So I mean that book is right in front of me. It is Zero to One by Peter
Ah,
Thiel.
yes.
Yeah, so this is something which I've read it quite number of times now, and I think from the innovation and out of the box thinking,
Mm.
this book has really changed my perspective.
Mm, mm. Space or the deep ocean? What fascinates you more?
Okay, so space from the technology front. No, yeah, yeah. Deep ocean is from maybe for an hobby perspective. Yeah, I like scuba diving and all.
But in a way, then you're saying you're covering right from the space up to the deep of ocean. And finally, one message for the young Indians who are dreaming of building deep tech technology ventures.
Keep it very simple in terms of no, one should always focus on what problem we are solving, no, and not getting too much carried away, no, with the technology aspirations one might have. More and more things you keep it at a fundamental level, more and more fundamentally strong you are, and if you are sure, the technology is going to, change the way world is behaving. That is where, it actually, you can actually take that forward. So that is what I'd want any young Indian to start watching for.
Oh, no. Thank you, Urmil. Thank you so much for joining us. In fact, as you said towards the end, your entire conversation makes me feel or reminds me again that innovation is not just about having some advanced technology. It's about, how do you use that technology to create impact in the real world? And that's
Absolutely,
that's
absolutely.
really where real innovation lies. And as more and more companies like you come forward, I think that will all help in taking India, at a global stage as far as this deep tech, as far as climate intelligence, as far as thermal intelligence, as far as space technology is concerned. So I think each one of you are playing a big role in kind of taking India to that place on the global stage, if I may say so. And I think I'll wish you all the very best in all your endeavors, you and your entire team.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you so much. Thanks. It was my privilege to actually talk about our mission, and it was a privilege talking to you, especially with the kind of profile you had, the career you had. It is very really inspiring.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.